Okay, so if you've used Notion's sub items, you probably have found that although they're sometimes pretty convenient, they could also cause some headaches. But with Notion's new database automations, we could set up more specific rules so that as you create sub items, in this case, we're going to be looking at subtasks, you can decide what properties are inherited automatically without having to fill in these properties for each and every subtask. You can automate the whole process. This is something that has come up in client meetings probably for the past few years, I think, since sub items came out. So I'm very excited about this and the ability to just set up these automations and do it in a way that's easy to manage, especially without the need for third-party automation tools. In this video, we're going to take a look at how database automations work with creating an automation where sub items inherit specific properties from that parent item, specifically looking at tasks, so that when we have a task and we are creating subtasks, we're grabbing things like the project that it's related to, the due date, status properties, and some other details. I will say it's not perfect. There's some things that we are going to want to look out for, which we'll get into. So stick around to the end for the recommendations on how to set up these automations and a few tips to make sure that they work as expected. If you're new here, I'm Dave DeCespedes. I'm a certified Notion consultant, and I help teams get up and running in Notion, and primarily through migrating to Notion, building out workspaces, training, automations, usually all of the above. So if you're interested in Notion and productivity content, definitely subscribe to get those future videos. So we have a standard task database that's related to a projects database with some familiar properties like due date, status. In this case, I track estimated amount of time for each task. And just as an aside, there's no filters, or the only sorting here is sorting by when these tasks were created, just so that we have clarity around what we're building. And we're going to set up our own filters and sorts on the video. So what we want to do first is create 2 new views, and one of these we're going to be using for our automation. I definitely recommend starting with a single view, just so that we avoid setting up an automation for every view in the database. It may disrupt other automations that you have, whether they're in Notion or using other third-party automation tools. So you want to start with one view, and if it's up and running and you want to expand it so that this automation runs anywhere we see the task database, then you could always expand it after. So I'm going to duplicate this first view, and we're just going to call this by project. And we're going to group tasks by project. So benefit of using relations is you could sort, filter, group by those relations or by that relation's properties as well. So once this populates, we'll see here that we have tasks grouped by project, but you also notice this is showing everything in our task database, even if they're projects that are done. So what we want to do next is create a filter, and I have a roll up, which is rolling up the project status. And when we use this as a filter, we could say only show tasks that are related to active projects. So that means that these toggles are only showing active projects, and any projects that are either not started or completed, even if they have tasks that are incomplete, will just get hidden by default. This just kind of keeps this view focused and doesn't show any more than we need. So now that we have this view, I probably want to sort these tasks. So if, for example, we have some tasks within business development, let's say we sort this by status. And if we move that as the default sort, when we have something in progress, it just kind of moves to the bottom. And let's have a second sort for due date. So as things are due, kind of adjusts so that the tasks that are due the earliest show up at the top. And then we'll say for everyone, just kind of updates the view in case you're sharing the workspace with other team members. So from here, we're going to set up our last view, which is going to be subtasks. And we're duplicating the previous view, so we keep this grouping by tasks function. And what we're going to do now is set up our automation so that when we create a sub item, it'll retain some properties from that parent item, specifically the due date, status, and if it's related to a particular project. We're going to head over to the lightning icon, which is where all of our database automations live. So if we click here, we see that we don't have any active. We're going to set up our first one, and we're going to call this subtasks inherit parent task info. And here for all pages and tasks, we're going to leave this for now and update that at the very end. But first, we're going to start with our trigger, which is when a page is added. But we also want to add another rule, which is when a parent task is edited. And one key reason why, because I was racking my brain on this for probably a few hours, is when we just apply it to all pages, even if you add a task that is within a project, because it doesn't have a parent item, it just removes all of the properties. So we want to make sure that this automation only applies when a sub item has a parent task that's edited. So if we created a sub item nested under a parent task, we're essentially updating that parent task property. So we'll get into how that looks. So first thing we want to do is we've got our trigger. Next is we want to create a variable. And this is specifically pulling in the trigger page and the parent task that's related to the trigger page. So first we're going to select trigger page and then period, and we're going to look for parent task. And then here we're just going to say first, because this is a relation, you could potentially have multiple parent tasks, even though for most teams we have one parent task and then multiple subtasks. Also, if you use Notion's standard project and task template, it might be called parent item. So just make sure that you've got the right naming in the case that yours is not called parent task. So we're going to click save. We have our first variable. Now what we're going to do is set our rules so that the sub item retains the parent item's project, due date, and status. So we're going to start there. Here we're going to edit property and we're going to look for status. And instead of using a standard option, we're going to select custom formula and we're going to use variable 1, which is the parent page, followed by status, and we'll click save. Next, we're going to do due date, custom formula again, variable due, save that. And then the last one, we're going to edit the project. So let's look for the project database up here, custom formula again, variable project. So again, this is referencing this variable that we set up so that when we create a subtask, it's looking at the parent task and then pulling that information and applying it to the subtask. So when we click create, you'll notice that if I go up here at the very top, we can't apply this only to the subtask view. Reason being is because if we go into our filter, we're actually using a rollup for a filter, and at least as of now, database automations can't work with views that are using filters that are rollups. So we're going to turn this off and save. We're going to close these projects. So now if we go back into our database automation and then click edit, we'll see here that subtasks is now an option. So we're going to select subtasks, which means that only when we add tasks within this view will this automation run. So if we were to add tasks in our by project view, if I expand this and add a task here, edit guest sessions, and I expand here, you'll see here this subtask is not retaining any information from the parent task other than the project, but that's because we're looking at these tasks grouped by project. So by default, any tasks that get added within this view are retaining that information, in this case, the project. If you set this up and it's working well in your specific view, then you always have the option to go back in and apply to all tasks or the entire database. So when we click save, now anywhere we add a subtask, let's add a parent item here, module 1, let's say that's due December 6th, and that's in progress. When we expand this and publish lesson 1, now this runs the automation, and then we'll grab the due date and the status. So curious to hear what you think. Are you planning on using this sub item automation, Or are you approaching these automations in a slightly different way? And side note, we're going to be doing some more deep dives on Notion's latest features, specifically on automations, forms, layouts, all that good stuff. So if you're curious about any of these features, or you have a particular use case that you think might be good to cover, definitely let me know in the comments. Otherwise, let me know what you think, and see you in the next video. If we head back to our subtasks view and we open the same project, let's say for guest sessions, this is due the 22nd and it's designated up next and it's already tied to this project. If we add a subtask, let's add edit JM interview. We'll notice that we'll give that a second, and then we'll see here that it applies the due date and up next, and also applies the parent project. So